One. Hi everyone, this is Anna Sophia Canolli. This is an episode where we are going to discuss immigration at length. And please stay tuned for some sophisticated cooking tips. And my honored guests here tonight are Paul Frankel. Paul, please introduce yourself.
Hello, I'm Paul, let's see, what can be said about me? Probably do better if somebody asks me a question.
Well, you're probably one of the funniest people I've ever met.
I can second that.
Let's see. I was born in Siberia in 1972, left in 1979.
Jeez.
I've been in the U.S. since 1980, mostly up north when I was a kid, and down south since 91.
What got you involved in the LP initially?
Initially, I was looking for a party that was against the drug war and against the military-industrial complex and against corporate government collusion.
Sure.
Because when I was younger, I thought the Democrats would do those things when a younger generation would take power. Then when they nominated Bill Clinton, I kind of saw through that whole thing because he was of the generation that protested against those things when they were younger. And then when he gets to be in power, of course, he is none of those things. The system didn't. They didn't change the system. The system changed them. And so I see, okay, the Democrats are not going to end the drug war. They're not going to end the wars overseas. They're not going to end corporate government collusion. They're going to just continue all of that stuff and be hypocrites, just like their parents, and just like Republicans. So I needed somebody to support that was actually against those things. And at that time on my ballot in Alabama, we had only Clinton, Bush, Perot, and Libertarians. I knew all the other three all supported all that stuff, and so I know Libertarians. I marched with them against the drug war in New York when I lived there, but they're for all this right-wing stuff. Can I really support them? Well, I guess they're the lesser of four evils. So I wrote for an inquiry package from the National Party. At that time, they used to send out a book called Libertarianism in One Lesson, which actually, I looked at the arguments and it applied it across the board, where, just because something is good doesn't mean that it should be mandatory, and just because something is bad doesn't mean it should be illegal. Well, those were the same arguments I was making on the drug war. I was already an activist against that. And on other issues, I said, even as a liberal at the time, I was for gun rights. I said, it doesn't mean the government should have all the guns because, it's not really the organization you should trust. I looked at that, and it applied to a lot of other issues. And I said, okay, logically, this all makes sense. So I'll vote for them. But can I really be a party member? And at that time, I took the quiz and the pledge and everything much more seriously. So I said, okay, let me read all the rest of these books in the further reading section. So I took a couple of years, and it's a couple of hundred books, but I read them and discussed it some places. Yeah, check it out. It's actually online. It's in a PDF, Libertarianism in One Lesson by David Berglund. Scroll to the end. There's a section that says for further reading, and it lists all the books that go into more detail.
You keep mentioning these things called books. Is that like these analog Kindles that I keep hearing about?
I'm not sure. It was. You can, if you do a search, Libertarianism in One Lesson by David Berglund. It's had several editions, and then it's like 110-page PDF about. You scroll to the end. There's about 6 pages, which is just titles of other books that you can read. And so from about 1992 to 94, I read those. and it was enough to back up the theoretical point that libertarianism is logically consistent and makes sense with a lot of historical and other evidence that showed that not only is it the right thing morally, but it's also the right thing practically. And at that point, I joined the party, but I was too busy to do much of anything with it because I was in school and working and doing all this stuff. I had a
Sure.
full-time job taking weather readings and a part-time job running the computer lab at the college. Over that time is when the graphical internet came out with a World Wide Web, and I actually got kind of addicted to that while waiting for different computer programs to process for my graduate courses and running the computer lab and stuff. So I started arguing politics online, and that was actually kind of I felt it was kind of a digital analog to what I used to always do at bars and stuff. So it was kind of natural. By the '96 election, I end up doing a lot of that. Then within about a year after that, what happened was I'd been trying to do too much with school and work and whatnot, and ended up not doing any of it. And all of a sudden, I have time on my hands. Then, right around that same time, the county party was formed again. We'd had one, but I hadn't been involved with it because I was too busy. For a couple of years, I guess it didn't exist. So this guy sends me something in the mail, says, "Okay, county party is starting up. We'd like you to join us." And I thought it would be some big meeting, and I show up, and it's me and two other people. So that was the creation of our county group, and one of them was the only one who was going to the state meetings. And during the course of one of those, he came back from there to the county meeting and said, "Hey, they're looking for a organizer for ballot access for the state. By the way, they need 40-something thousand signatures." So naturally, I said, "Well, I know nothing whatsoever about this. And I'm sure they'll have qualified people who actually know what they're doing. But if they get really, really desperate, I'll go ahead and do it, just because it's better to have somebody doing it than nobody."
Right.
And so he goes back to the state meeting and says, "Hey, we got a volunteer." Cutting out all the rest of it, of course. So I became the state ballot access coordinator as my first role. And
what a sexy title.
Yeah, a few months later, they said, "Oh yeah, we have some candidates. They need to get on the ballot. So can you go help them?" And I said, "Oh great, yeah, sure. I'll jump in my car. I used to drive at the time, and I'll go knock out these districts real quick. I'll just go to Walmart in the mall, and they'll all let me petition. It won't be that hard." So I go down to my first candidate in Montgomery, and I call up Walmart in the mall, and much to my surprise, they said no. So I end up going door to door in Montgomery, Alabama in the summer for my first campaign. So it
Door
wasn't
to door, huh? Knocking on doors.
Yeah, not that much fun. I don't do it anymore, but yeah, it was hot and hard. And
were you any good at it? That is a tough job.
I was getting about 10 signatures an hour, which I guess is what most pros get door to door. But the problem was it was only a few hours when it's any good, like in the evenings and weekends. And before long, it's too late because people are already going to bed any earlier, and people are still at work or in the middle of dinner. I never felt comfortable with it.
Yeah, you don't want to be a nuisance.
So I really like petitioning at locations much more. It's much better than door to door for me. But it's door to door is good for, like, if you got a gerrymandered district, which is what we had to deal with at that point, because people just don't know what district they're in. I tried it some other ways too. I went to a gun show and just try to get everybody to sign and say, "Hey, some of these will be from the district." I try to show people a map and said, "Are you in this district?" And even when they're looking at the map, they still can't figure it out. So we tried it at the polls, which is actually where I really got the idea that I could do it for a living because, I got a couple of hundred signatures. It wasn't that hard. I did recruit a bunch of people to work that day, but unfortunately the newspaper messed up our ad. They transposed the phone number. So I said, okay, I'll call this person and see if they can direct anyone that answers the ad to me. And it turned out it was some crazy person that screamed at me and cussed when I called and just like talked gibberish. So I said, okay, that's not going to work.
Yeah, that's
yeah. So there's been so many different things like that. It's been a real adventure, the party, just one thing after another like that. But a lot of it is fun too. So, I got to travel all over the country, meet all kinds of people. I've literally talked to over 1 million people in person with the party through or by the party, and it led to getting into the petition business for a living, which I've had hundreds of different clients, all sorts of parties, candidates, initiatives in different states. Pretty much have done the entire lower 48, traveling around doing that for over 20 years now. And also became a reporter for Independent Political Report, which is we've done thousands and thousands of articles and comments discussing all sorts of alternative or what people call third parties independence. Became involved with the social media with the party and campaign management, all sorts of things. So it's been multifaceted. And,
very involved in a lot of good work. Sounds like a lot of important work.
I hope so. A lot of times it feels like we're spinning the wheel, but a lot of times it feels like there is a ripple effect. And even if the impact that we're having is not immediately obvious,
Yes.
it can. It's how a lot of times you'll find that it's helped somebody in some way that you don't even realize at the time. People tell you later, or you see it later, that it's had a ripple effect.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Just like I had, I got involved in this Jordan Peterson group a long time ago, maybe about 2.5 years ago, and I was trying to educate people there that this is a scammer. This guy is a charlatan. And then years later, I have gotten messages from these people, and they go into the other message folder because they're not my friends on Facebook, thanking me for putting the seed there to just see that that's a really bad idea. So yeah, that's what we can do. We can plant a seed.
Mm-hmm. Well, it is very difficult to overestimate the power of that. As you said, ripple effects, out and out and out. I feel like we are, like the LP has more of a chance to get a bit more of the vote share coming up this time. I kind of feel people are getting tired, like really, really tired of the two-party system, especially in just this clown show that we have in 2019. And I would really like to see the LP energize and get in motion. As someone who does ballot access and stuff like that, do you have any ideas where people might focus on getting libertarians on candidates, or anything of just like the nuts and bolts of how we might do better this time around?
Well, those are some different things. Like with ballot access, we want to be on everywhere.
Sure.
Every state. It's not always possible, but we always get pretty close.
Is there anywhere
at least
where
in
it's
terms
trouble?
of the presidential ticket?
I think that one of the states that is really bad with that is Tennessee.
Tennessee has a kind of a dual ballot access For independent candidates, it's very easy, but for parties, it's very hard. So if you don't want a party label, it's 25 signatures for any office except president. They've now made it 275 because they ruled that every elector it has to get 25 separate. So it's 275 for a presidential ticket because they have 11 electoral votes. But that's still only like 400 something raw signatures. That's really easy. But if you want to actually have a party label, it takes over 50,000 valid signatures for them to be a party, just like here in Alabama.
Could you have?
That, yeah, that's like one of the hardest states for that.
I'm just curious. Theoretically, wouldn't it then be possible to just have someone run technically independently and just be endorsed by the LP? They're just not.
Oh yeah, yeah. We do that with the presidential ticket there every time, and many other offices. But the problem is that they have, because it's so easy, they have a huge amount of independents on the ballot, and people go to vote. They don't have any idea who any of them are.
Sure.
So to protest that, what they did for governor this last time was they had 20-something LP members who all signed up to be governor candidates as independents. And so the ballot actually went to an extra page because they had so many governor candidates.
No. All right.
Yeah, it's because they've tried suing and lobbying and everything to get more reasonable party access, so people will actually see that who is running as a libertarian, and the party can build some kind of brand and continuity.
Right.
They keep getting shut down with all these lobbying and legislative and legal efforts so far. So they said, okay, well, you want to do it like that? Well, we'll go the other route and just run 20 million candidates as independents. So I guess they made somewhat of a point because people did notice that. Like, wow, that's even more than usual. Some people were not very happy about that, but it's the system they created because they want to make it so hard for anybody else to be a party.
Oh yeah. It is.
Well, in Alabama, we don't have. We do have an easier presidential route, so we do that. We've done that the last 4 times. Presidential candidates have been on as independents. It's 5,000 valid signatures for the statewide for the party. It's over 50,000 right now, and that's valid. That's not even raw signatures. So you're talking about it would take probably like 80,000 signatures to get on as a party here. The same thing in Tennessee. In most states, it's easier. So it'll vary. Like in New Jersey, it's 800 valid signatures. In some states, you don't need any. Like Mississippi and Louisiana, you just have to be organized as a party. So that can mean just filing a statement with the Secretary of State. Some states you can pay just a filing fee to be a party or a candidate. But here it's very difficult. We actually have the most ridiculous ballot access law because you have to get 20% in a statewide race to remain on as a party, and then if you don't get it, you need 3% of the number of people that voted for governor.
God, it's just criminal. The way they rig it like that. It's a
lot of signatures, but it's doable in local races. That's the one thing. Like we got a special election now for a state legislature, District 42. Doug Ward is running, and we need 400 something valid for that. So that's doable. We got another month. We qualified 4 candidates that way in 2018. We had 2 legislative and 2 county level candidates, 1 county commission and one was a county board of education. Then in 2014, we had about, I think, 14 candidates in 4 counties, and they could only run at the county level. No legislative or congressional or statewide, none of that stuff. We're kind of learning to use this crazy system they've given us. And actually, in 2016, we got screwed over because we did like 10,000 signatures for a 6,000 signature requirement for Jefferson County, and the county said that only 40% of our signatures were valid. Well, we checked them ourselves, and it was almost 80% were
On what
valid.
grounds did they claim that 60% were invalid? Did they give you a reason?
They just claimed that they checked them, and that's what it said. I said, okay, well, and we presented them with the evidence. Here's the evidence that shows that more than 3/4 of these people are actually voters in the county. We have proof. And they said, well, sorry, this is not an original submission. You can't submit photocopies, and we're not going to look at any of this evidence. So to me, that sounds like that should have been a slam dunk lawsuit.
Well, it's clear election fraud. Clear election
fraud. And for whatever reason, the party never did get explained to me why they didn't pursue it, but they just kept saying, oh, well, we'll give them another chance. We'll talk to this other person. Like, hurry this up, sue them already. So we are actually finally suing them now over the voter list because they also want to charge us $35,000 for the state voter list, and they give it for free to Democrats and Republicans. And that's already been litigated all the way up to the Supreme Court in the past. And so it should be a clear case. But right now, the judge is sitting on it, and the state filed its motion to dismiss, and that's where it stands for the last several months. So there's nobody even knows how long that's going to take for the judge to even respond to that.
Okay, a quick interjection. My mom was listening to this podcast, and she said, "Success to all of you. You seem like cool people."
Ah, thanks.
Yeah.
We're cool people.
Right on. Well, she can talk too if she wants.
She can understand English just fine. She's just, yeah, she can.
Yeah. So that means of the 4 people here, I'm the only one who speaks one language.
Well, you haven't taught him any Russian yet.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Anyway.
no, he hasn't learned any Russian yet. I will teach him.
Okay. Well,
I'm an eager student. I'll say that.
Okay.
So we can start lessons right now. Every time we say something, we'll just translate it.
Okay. I'll see if I can internalize some of it.
Just start talking in Russian.
Yeah, should we go word by word or sentence by sentence? How do you want to do this?
We can do that. We can just start talking in Russian, but that wouldn't be fair to John.
Да, можно это поставить на это Либертарианская партия России на их сайт. Может, они тоже начнут эти подкасты присоединяться.
Ой, да, точно. Конечно, мы это сделаем. Но я это, знаешь, как я собираю, чтобы было побольше их. То есть у меня теперь 7, да, 7 мы сейчас.
Okay, so should we translate that now or just continue doing in Russian?
I kind of like inventing my own meaning to it, frankly.
Okay, yes, we know you're creative. So what did you think we said?
I have no idea. I don't know. I couldn't tell you.
Well, okay, so let's talk about something here. Speaking in your second or fourth language is difficult, isn't it?
Well, first and second are pretty easy. I mean, I still speak Russian every day with my parents and sometimes with a few other people. And I learned English when I was 7, so it's not like it was hard at that age.
Right.
Spanish, I start to speak it better when I speak it a lot. But then when I go a long time without speaking much Spanish, I'm down to like maybe a couple of hundred words or something. And then like Hebrew, I can read it a little bit, but I can't really speak it. I can say a few words here and there. You know, Italian I learned when we were there, and we stayed there for a few months on our way here. But I was 7, so I didn't keep up with it, so I forgot it. But you know, I think if I were to start being around a bunch of Italians and speaking Italian, then I would start speaking it again.
Yeah. You would pick it up within a week, I'm sure.
Yeah, so it's really kind of an emergent thing. It's really about what you use on a day-to-day basis. But like if I'm in an area where there's Russian speakers and Spanish speakers, and I'm petitioning, sometimes I'll start asking them, and I've actually petitioned in 3 languages a little bit. So that was fun because I have to guess which one I will ask first.
Right.
Well, a lot of times you can guess, but sometimes you get it wrong. And then sometimes people will throw you for a loop because their accent, you think maybe they're Russian, but they're Romanian or something.
Oh yeah, that's the hard one. Yeah, that's the hard one. Romanian is very different from Slavic languages, isn't it? I can't understand it.
It's different. They have
It's
like
kind of
elements of Italian and Russian and all sorts of things they incorporate. But actually, I think most languages are like that. Even like Russian now incorporates a lot more English than it did when we left 40 years ago. And you know, it incorporated like a lot of French from the Napoleonic era. And English is much the same. You'll find when different groups either invade or immigrate or trade a lot, or they're used as a common language, like French at one time, Latin at another, and then a lot of that comes into which other language. Or you'll find, like, for example, at times when England and France either were at war or had a lot of trade or a lot of people going back and forth, that they traded a lot of words in each other's languages, but also in rather odd ways, like certain terms will be used as a negative, like the English will call it, well, it's not really a negative, but they meant it as an insult, I guess. French kissing, French fucking, whatever. But the French will say the same thing, English this, English that. And they, I guess they'll both, at times, had a lot to do with Germany. They'll start incorporating a bunch of German words, or, you know, so things kind of like go back and forth like that. You know, my grandparents spoke Yiddish, which is kind of a mix of German, Hebrew, Russian, you know.
Yeah, Yiddish is weird. Yeah.
Yeah, so every language is kind of different like that. Hebrew nowadays, it's kind of different because it was a more or less a dead language that was revived.
Right.
It was like somebody all of a sudden was to create, let's say, Rome as a separate country, and they were to revive Latin as a living language. It's something similar.
Yeah. So for me, I mean, English is my 4th language.
So I guess when you grew up, everybody still in all of the ex-Soviet countries all still spoke Russian. And did you also had Georgian as like, did you learn it from the time you were little, or was that something that became more common?
It's something else, because I grew up. It's kind of a unique situation because my dad is Georgian, and Georgian language is so different from every language.
Yeah.
Basically, and my mom is Russian, so I grew up with both. My first language was Georgian. My second language was Russian. My third language was French, and my 4th language was English. By the time I was 4.
And you still speak it better than many native speakers.
Oh yeah, yeah. It's true. The people that that come up to you and say, why don't you go back to your country to speak that foreign language? Most of them have very terrible English, and they don't speak
Oh
any
yeah.
other language.
Right.
They also have very terrible thinking in general, for the most
Yeah.
part. I think the language, the issues with their grammar are just a subset of that. Ignorance in general.
Yeah. So
Yes.
it's funny how people that don't have any appreciation for any other culture don't have much culture of their own.
My culture's
Yes.
boring. I love other cultures. I live in
Well, I don't
Minnesota.
know, maybe boring to you, but I don't think it's boring.
I might be being a little too harsh there, but just saying.
I mean, to many of us coming from other places, America's fascinating. Like it's something so completely different from what you find anywhere else. That it's like it really is something to appreciate.
Sure. Absolutely. But so too is many other places. And as libertarians, right, we tend to like elevate the individual, right? Doesn't matter where they're from. So I find it odd that there are strains of thoughts inside the like liberty movement, libertarian party, like bordertarians sometimes people call them. Like it just seems to almost kind of fundamentally be hypocritical with like
Oh,
the
it is.
importance.
But here's where that comes from. Actually, the history of it was libertarianism actually originated on the left.
Oh yeah,
Like
yeah.
Bastiat sat on the left in the French Parliament, and for many years, liberalism, libertarianism, leftism were all related, very related strains. But somewhere about 100 years ago, progressives and socialists began to the process of taking over the left and using what were formerly considered right-wing methods, in other words, government force, to achieve allegedly liberal goals. In reaction to that, some people on the conservative side began to use libertarian rhetoric to kind of create something called conservative libertarianism fusionism, which became pretty common on the right in America, not so much in other countries, but mostly in the U.S. On the right, it became pretty common to use the rhetoric of limited government
Yeah, I was gonna
and
say
small
it's the
government,
rhetoric.
and it's always been hypocritical on their part, because whenever you put conservatives and Republicans in office, they don't make government smaller. They might make a few little parts of government smaller here and there,
Yeah,
but not even that. They
good
just
headline in the paper.
slow the rate of growth of those parts of government. But vis-a-vis the Democrats, not even so much slow the rate of growth overall, but on many other areas, they increase it faster. And overall, actually, government grows faster with Republicans in office, believe it or not. Historically, especially the last 50 years, whenever Republicans are elected, government grows faster even than with the Democrats, but with both of them it grows. So it's kind of stupid to say, oh, well, yeah, we're really on the right and we're really conservatives. Well, no, we're not. We never have been and we never should be. But
Yeah.
then about 30 years ago, certain people around the orbit of Ron Paul, Lou Rockwell, and Murray Rothbard decided that the great way to grow in libertarianism is to ally it with people even further on the right, who were really nationalists, racists, theocratic, just far-right bigots. And they created something called paleo-libertarianism, which doesn't even it doesn't even make sense logically, the word, because paleo-conservatism is something that actually makes sense. It's a return to the original nationalist theocratic roots of conservatism. Okay, that makes sense. But paleo-libertarianism, if you think about it, return to the older form of libertarianism, well, no, it's not. There was never any form of libertarianism like that before them. It's an illogical word, illogical concept, illogical strain of people's thought, but it's kind of cult-like, and it became kind of ingrained in certain circles. Lou Rockwell did a lot to promote it online with LouRocco.com. Got a lot of audience. They've been very strong about putting out a lot of materials. Mises Institute puts out a lot of materials. Then when Ron Paul decided to run again for presidency, this time as Republican, they got a tremendous amount of audience. And so a lot of people came to think of that as libertarianism. And a lot of them have at times joined the Libertarian Party. A lot of them are still in the Libertarian Party. Others who used to be in the Libertarian Party now became anti-voting or became Republicans and continue to consider themselves libertarians. Other people never joined the party, but they call themselves libertarians. And a lot of times, people go to these conferences like Freedom Fest, whatever, and you find a lot of organizations there, both from the libertarian side and the conservative side. They all hobnob and network together, and they all think of themselves as being on the same side and opposed to Democrats, liberals, socialists, who are all seen as being the same thing.
Centralized planners.
It's a hard thing to break, that view or that alignment in people's minds. The media spreads it, telling everybody we're on the right. Progressives all think we're on the right. And now the right is becoming more authoritarian or openly authoritarian with Trump. And then you get this alt-right, which is basically neo-Nazis. And they're all, oh yeah, we're libertarian, we're Trump supporters, we're super this and that, and then, oh yeah, let's all get a fascist haircut and do the Sieg Heil salute and say 1488, and yet we're still libertarian somehow. We all, well, how do you get any further from libertarian than being a Nazi?
You don't.
So, oh yeah, how's a bordertarian? How's that libertarian? Well, it's just crazy, Let's have a fascist state at the border, and that's how you get freedom.
Yeah, right.
Well, how about if we try that between states or between cities? Are you going to like going through checkpoints and asking for permission to move neighborhoods? Do you want it on every block? How about every time you leave your house, you got to apply for a visa and fill out paperwork and pay a fee and go through a checkpoint every time you go every 50 feet? Does that sound libertarian?
I mean, no.
But, all these people chanting, build a wall, well, 90% of immigrants come in by airplane, so the wall's not going to be enough. Are we going to build a dome?
That's right. I heard something about a dome of freedom being proposed once upon a time.
Oh, yes. But, people can tunnel from underneath, so it's going to have to be a sphere.
We'll cement over the damn country. No, I hear you. I actually kind of worked with the Republican Party in my state a little bit, not all that long ago. So I kind of do come from the right a little bit. I've always been a libertarian, though, more than Republican. But I see like the trends now in the right-wing circles, and they are it's getting not good. Like we need a libertarian party right now, in my opinion.
Oh yeah. We need one that doesn't act like a GOP junior, because we keep getting one former and future Republican after another running. If people start saying, "Well, is this really a party that's separate and distinct from all others?"
No, it's absorbed by the establishments that way.
Oh yeah. And then at the same time, the Republican Party, I mean, their leading intellects are so-called, and I don't know if you can really call them intellects, but people like Tucker Carlson and Rush Limbaugh, and they're now all saying, well, business is worse than government. We have to have a lot more government, not just on the things that the right has generally been for more government on, but even on economic issues. We need more big government. And they're openly saying this now. They're in big conferences, national conservatism, which is, only one step removed from National Socialism, because their economics is sounding more and more socialist also. So that's why not just call it fascism? It's the original word for what they're doing. You know, I guess it's not popular yet, but why not just be honest about it and call it what it
is? Sure. I mean, I'm okay with that. I don't mind calling them all a bunch of fascists. I mean,
actually, Lou Rockwell is a good example. Let me pull it up. What he said about Mussoliniism, and then compare it to Trumpism, which he's now a big proponent of. But this description, hang on. I think it was in the comments here. But this is Lou Rockwell writing about Mussolini fascism just a few years ago, before Trump. He says, the emphasis on centralization, the glorification of police and the military, the yearning for a third way between capitalism and socialism, the elevation of public service above the services we freely provide one another on the market, the creepy and incessant references to my president and our president, or the depiction of the state as a quasi-divine instrument.
Okay.
Does that not sound exactly like the cult of Trump that he's joining now?
I see some parallels, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, so it's you know, maybe he was talking about Obama back then, which was not wrong, but it's no less true now with the Trump cult.
Yeah,
right.
It's worse now.
Yeah, and then, but I also look over the Democrats then, and I see a lot of radicalization going on there too, with a lot of stuff that I also find terrifying. Like,
oh yeah,
I'm not all that old, but in my life, I can't say of a time where I've ever thought the LP was needed more than it is right now. Like a third option that's not going to blow everything up.
This is our time to shine. This is our time to step forward and do
I agree.
the right thing. This is
well, this is what always happens. You know, the Democrats and Republicans are becoming more and more like European socialists and fascists in the lead up to the war. And the worse they get, the more people feel compelled, out of fear and hatred of whichever one. This is the classic divide and conquer. You know, they're afraid of the Republicans and they're afraid of the Democrats with good reason, but they're afraid of one or the other more. So they keep saying, "Oh, it's so important now to support this one." But the end result is the same. It's the pit and the pendulum. You know, you find that you're given the option between two gruesome ways of dying, and as long as you feel that it's really important to vote against one or really important to vote against the other, they just keep getting worse. And so unless you have freedom as an option, no matter how unlikely it seems, well, you can't vote for freedom because you're letting the pit win. Oh, you can't vote for freedom because you're letting the pendulum win.
Sure.
You know, but
I think this is the time for the LP to rise right now, and that's why I have become so involved in it in the past couple of years. I think that this is the time for us to.
Oh yeah. Well, I think it's important. Like for example, that we have candidates who support freedom of immigration, because you have you know, the Trump cult that's chanting build the walls, but on the Democratic side, you have Bernie Sanders said that open borders are a right-wing Koch brothers concept. And you had Obama, and a lot of people would be surprised to know that so far Obama has deported more people than Trump.
Oh yeah, well, they called him the deporter in chief. It's like 3 million people or something.
Now Trump is trying to do everything he can to catch up and outpace, but so far Obama still holds the record. Of course, he had 8 years, and Trump has only been in for less than 4 so far. But yeah, I mean, the Democrats have not been that good on these things. In fact, when Reagan gave millions of immigrants amnesty, a lot of Democrats were saying that this was a bad thing and it would take away jobs from union workers. Then a lot of them were saying it would be bad for the environment. There was a lot of Democrats at that time who were against so much freedom for immigration.
I mean, just think about that. Thinking that people who are from a different country are bad for the environment.
But
Yeah,
in fact, that's not a new idea. It's
so clear.
actually the biggest anti-immigrant group. Some research has been done lately to find out that they were all funded by extremist Nazis and racist bigots, and their statistics are used all over the anti-immigrant movement. But they also like to masquerade as an environmentalist movement, and they used a lot of environmentalist rhetoric to.
So I'm happy to inform you that that guy died 4 days ago.
Well, yeah, let's celebrate. I'll have a drink.
I know. Yeah, have a drink. Me too.
Выпьем за его смерть.
John Stanton. He's the one who found it.
Yeah. So I had a shot for him, and so we can continue about this. Yeah, this crap that they've been spewing is behind a lot of the rhetoric that the bordertarians use, that the Trump people use, and it was also common. Actually, when I studied environmental science in college, and we had people come in that talked about this stuff. How can we help the environment? Well, we really need to limit immigration, and by the way, we also need to limit how many kids people are allowed to have.
Mm-hmm.
Really.
Yeah.
But pretty much anything that the bordertarians say about immigrants can also be said about how many kids people have, because name any talking point they have, and you can say, oh well, we should limit how many kids people are allowed to have for the same reasons. Well, are you all ready to say that? Oh no, that's different.
Nope, they won't. I haven't been paying too close attention to what the bordertarians are saying these days. Probably the same old stuff, right? Like the importance of maintaining cultural integrity.
Oh sure. They'll say anything and everything. Oh, they're lazy. They're just coming in for welfare, but they'll also come in and take all our jobs. Well, which one is it?
Right. That's kind of inherently contradictory there, huh? I love the one where they just assume that, well, if we let all these people in, they're just going to vote for Democrats who are going to vote to like raise taxes and all that. And I just think,
see that there's another example. If that was true, which it's not, then you could say the same thing about how many kids people are allowed to have. Oh, we can't let people have kids without our permission. Otherwise, they'll have kids who'll vote for Democrats.
Yeah, they'll vote for Democrats, right? Because people aren't algorithmic. It's not just set in stone. Like you could possibly reach out to these people and convince them of what you believe to be superior ideas. Why do you have to just assume?
In reality, that talking point is BS, because first of all, a lot of people have zero interest in voting or ever becoming to vote. They just want to come in and work, make a living, and maybe go home. Some of them, or stay, but they don't care about this political stuff.
Sure.
But some people do end up voting. A lot of them actually end up voting. If they end up voting for Democrats, it's only because of the anti-immigrant rhetoric of the Republicans.
Right.
A lot of them end up voting Republican anyway. But if you go a generation or two, it's the same things repeat themselves. Everyone assimilates actually at about the same pace. If anything, it's faster now. All the time, the anti-immigrant people always say, well, this new wave of immigrants will never assimilate. And then they do. After a generation or two, their voting patterns are almost exactly the same as the people who were here before them. So that talking point is false, as is everything else they say. They say that people come in to get welfare, and yet, on average, immigrants take a lot less welfare than native-born citizens. They commit less crime than native-born citizens, and they actually, people say they take our jobs. Well, immigrants create jobs because the economy is not a fixed-size pie. It's the pie gets bigger, and even though there's more people taking from it, each one gets a bigger slice as a result than they would get otherwise. So it actually benefits native-born people more to have immigrants come in. But because a lot of them have poor education in economics, among many other things, they fall for this stuff. And unfortunately, a lot of people that call themselves libertarians have uncritically bought the same crap. And when you give them links, stuff to read, they don't want to read it because it doesn't conform to their confirmation bias. So they rather listen to something they agree with.
Yeah, I suspect that when social media kind of came into full swing, you know, like most everyone started to have access to high-speed internet. Like the right and left in America kind of got introduced to the right and left in Europe, which is a little more extreme than the brands we had around here, and I think that might be part of what we're looking at right here. But
oh yeah,
I don't know.
Well, it's something where people feel a lot more empowered to talk about things that they would feel ashamed to say in person.
Oh yeah, for sure.
But well, if you're going to push something that's socially unacceptable, like Nazism or pro-rape ideology or whatever kind of garbage people can think of, then they feel very comfortable saying it in an environment where they think they're anonymous. You know, if they can hide behind the screen, they feel like it's no problem to say that stuff or to download it, read it, spread it to others, create 20 fake accounts, and just throw out any kind of crap.
Start their own propaganda war.
Yeah, it makes it a lot easier for this kind of stuff to spread. But a lot of it is also discontentment because you know, people feel like their world is being shaken up, the roles of men and women, the culture with different immigrants and ethnic groups coming in, you know, gender and sexual roles. All of that is kind of getting shaken up. There's a lot of it is economic insecurity because the economy is changing. What kinds of jobs are in demand and which kinds are not. You know, a lot of stuff used to be manufactured here is now being manufactured in other countries because of comparative price advantages. And so a lot of people, especially people that don't have a lot of marketable skills or a lot of curiosity and interest and willingness to adapt, they become easy prey for you know, socialist and fascist rhetoric, just like what happened in Europe in between world wars. It became very common because of all of the tremendous shake-up of society and economy.
Yeah, it was pretty tremendous, the shake-up after World War I, for sure.
Well, yeah, I mean, if you look at World War I and II and the depressions and everything in between as one continuous phenomenon, it was, you know, what, 100 million or more people died just within Europe and Russia, and you know, the whole world was swept up in those wars. So
and all wars.
yeah, and then you had all these communist and fascist regimes that sprung up. I guess you could say decolonization throughout Asia and Africa grew up out of that. So yeah, it was a tremendous change that the world underwent.
For sure, for sure, for sure.
But a lot of it is like reaction to people coming into Europe and America from basically the result of things that Europe did throughout Middle East and North Africa throughout the colonial period and since then, in terms of foreign interventionism, and so it's basically the people coming into Europe is because Europe went into their countries, and the same thing like Central Americans coming up here now. Well, why are they coming? It's a lot of it is because of the policies the United States has carried out in Central America.
What? America isn't a pure champion of liberty and justice around the world?
Oh, certainly, especially when it gets people killing each other down there, and with the war on drugs, and makes it a transshipment point for drugs, and then spreads a war down there that causes people to come up here, then they get deported back down there and create gangs that control this drug market and make it to where people are really like afraid to even send their kids to school. And then you have crops failing because of different things that were pushed through the agribusiness corporate model that kind of depleted the soil, and so there's really nothing for people to stay for down there. They're starving, they're afraid, so they come up here. But a lot of it is because of things the U.S. did there, and so shocking for a lot of Americans to hear, I'm sure. But it's because we keep fighting for freedom.
For sure, I am a strong opponent of the American empire. I think it's probably one of the greatest forces for evil in the world, and it's negative for us and everyone everywhere. And I get a kick out of sometimes in libertarian circles when people are just so tribalistically knee-jerky defensive of when anyone criticizes America. They're like, "Rawr!" I'm like, that just doesn't.
Well, yeah, it's a lot of times it's because they come from this right-wing background where they just get.
No, I get it.
Yeah. The only reason we have freedom is because we slaughtered people all around the world and got involved in all these foreign conflicts. Well, really, is that why we have freedom? If it wasn't for that, you'd be speaking some other language today, and like пошел ты с этой хуйней.
Да, пошел кто-нибудь нахуй. На самом деле.
Yeah. So, you would all be speaking German now. Like, really? I mean, come on.
You would all be speaking German if not for America.
Hitler couldn't even take England, much less America. It's ridiculous.
Well, plus, when it's coming from like some 23-year-old kid who's never left his mom's basement, it's like you do not get to claim the defeat of Nazis for yourself.
Well, so, especially when you start sounding like the Nazis. Okay, you don't speak German, but it sure sounded better in the original German.
Yeah.
And then they say, "Oh yeah, you would all be speaking Arabic now." Really? Come on.
Yeah. My favorite though is when it's anarchists, when it's self-described anarchists.
Well, yes, because the best way to be an anarchist is to be a socialist or fascist and have a really huge, massive government, because that's the best way to have no government.
Right. I see eye to eye with you on that one, it seems. For sure. Is there anything you'd like to add, Anna? I thought you had a couple questions lined up, or maybe I'm wrong.
Me?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sorry. I don't mean to pull you.
Aren't we on your show? You can get a word in edgewise every once in a while, just because it's a couple of guys on the show.
You guys have been talking, so I'm listening. So
Okay, well, now it's our turn to listen.
So yeah, I do have questions for you, Paul.
Okay.
Pasha.
Давай.
So here are the questions. First one is, did you experience a culture shock when you moved here?
Um,
You were a kid.
somewhat, I guess, but you know, at 7, it's just one culture shock after another. I think I probably Italy was a bigger one because, well, actually, you know, Austria. Well, you know what? Before then, Moscow, because I came from Siberia, so we were only in Moscow for a few weeks, but it was pretty different. I had never been in such a big city and stuff, and you know, like wow, they got all this stuff. They got so many different flavors of ice cream, and you know, all this, you know, things a 7-year-old will notice. But then Austria, it was kind of a shock because it was so clean, and I'd never seen anything like that. I'm like, how do these people not litter everywhere? And then Italy was very different because, well, first of all, there were so many different people there, like Arabs, North Africans. There was palm trees, and it was just that was a whole different climate than what I'd been used to. I mean, I'd been in Crimea one summer, but other than that, I'd been used to a much more
Right. I know
different climate.
Come from. That's yeah.
So I guess U.S. The first thing, funny enough, the first things I saw in the U.S. other than the airport were gas lines, because this was during a gas shortage. It was Iran hostage crisis, and so a lot of countries were not doing business with the U.S. and there was a gas shortage. So yeah, this is the first thing I see. USA people lined up waiting for gas, just like the old lines we had for food and stuff in Russia.
Right.
Hmm. Burn.
So then it was a whole different culture shock. We were in Brooklyn, and there the first school I went to was financed by like ultra Orthodox Jews. So we had a half a day of learning English and American customs, and half a day of learning Hebrew and Jewish customs. And it was kids of all ages in the same class. So the main thing I learned was sex education from the older kids.
This is great.
So you know, I did learn a little bit of English from them, and actually, the summer after that, I learned a lot more because I went to summer camp, and they gave me this kid as a translator, and he was a real pain. I didn't like him, so I learned to speak English on my own.
I'm curious. You said when you learned like American customs and stuff. What qualified as a custom that was taught in like class?
I don't remember exactly, but there was a lot of things that were different to us.
Sure,
You know, like even going into a store and seeing a choice of products rather than waiting in line and taking whatever they happen to have that day because, hey, this is the week of the year when we have bananas.
Sure.
You know, it's not like you go and you say, oh yeah, there's all these hundreds of types of cereal. Wow, which one should I choose? It was more like, okay, I found finally at the end of the line. I need some cereal. You know, there's some buckwheat and there's some oatmeal. I'll take you know, a couple of kilograms of each, and hopefully there'll still be some by the next time I get to the front of the line.
See, Basha, you and I experienced different stages of the Soviet Union because when I was growing up, when I was there, none of that existed. It was like we had everything that the U.S. has and more because we had everything from China as well.
Oh yeah, sure, but also how many people could afford it?
Well, I don't know. We could.
Okay, Well, because like later, Russia became everything available, but a lot of people couldn't afford it. I mean, it was there.
Oh,
But
right. So let me talk to both of you about the early 90s because I was there in Russia. What
Okay.
happened?
yeah,
Yeah, you guys want to hear about this?
Yeah, I would love
sure.
to.
Okay, so what happened in about 1991 was that everything fell apart and everything is in chaos. And people started these small businesses of, selling beets or, you know, chicken or whatever, and clothes and all kinds of things that they could just come up with. And it was tough. It was a tough economy. That was a free market right there. And it was brutal.
Yeah, because you go through. It was a adjustment because
Right.
that's what happens. With the time that a market becomes more matured and a lot of things have been developed, but by that point the government is putting in a bunch of rules again. But I'm actually curious. Before then, like in 1980s, you said there was a lot of stuff available from China.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, definitely. And there was a lot of Japanese products. Like TVs and VCRs back then. You know, VCRs.
Well, in 1970s, we had TVs, but they were black and white, and maybe you had two channels or four channels if you were very lucky.
Yeah, no, we had, and but mind you, I lived in Moscow and Tbilisi.
Yeah, I lived in Irkutsk, so our
Yeah,
TVs did not have a remote control. They had a button, and I think they had either two channels or four channels. And we had the little transistor radios, and my dad used to actually catch Voice of America and BBC, and I didn't know what they were saying at the time. I didn't speak English, but it was interesting just hearing them talk.
Fascinating.
yeah, yeah, John, you gotta listen to this stuff. So, there was, there was a huge shift. Obviously, there was a huge shift, and it started, and I'm proud to say that Georgia, the country, started it in 1989, and I was there. I was there at that protest, and I watched. Oh, I was standing next to my cousin and her friend, and her friend got shot and killed, and I watched her die, and I was 11.
That's
Oh,
brutal.
Yeah, and I thought that could have been me. I watched her bleed to death. I tried to help, but that was it. That was the beginning of the end of the Soviet Union. That was Georgia in
oh,
19.
and I think it was around the same time when some of the other former Iron Curtain countries started to crack, like Romania
Yeah,
and then Germany, the wall.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah. That was after. Yeah, Georgia was the catalyst.
wow.
Hmm.
Interesting thing, actually, I was a little bit older, but it was right around that same time. It happened to me in New York. Our neighborhood was like the most violent area in the drug war. We had over 100 murders a year
Oh,
in Washington Heights, and I was actually just walking down the street with a friend of mine. Um, we were not involved in this particular shootout, but we happened to be coming by, and he got shot. I was had a bullet go maybe an inch from me and hit the wall, probably not even an inch. I mean, it felt like it hit me, but then I looked behind me, and it was actually didn't hit me. It was in the wall, but it must have come very, very close. Like I could hear it whiz by, like it was right there. So this is all the same stuff that was happening. I later read up a lot about it, which is how I became an activist against the drug war to begin with, because so many of my friends died in it, and I read about it, and it's like this is the same thing which happened with alcohol when it was made illegal. All of these same things happened with other drugs later. And look at this history, then all these drugs were legal and had so much less problems. But there was still problems. It's not like there's not drug problems when they're legal. It's just that they've gotten worse because it's made illegal. Same thing that happened with alcohol. You know, of course there's terrible problems with alcohol, but you make it illegal and it just makes it worse.
Yeah, 100% agreement. I mean,
So
like the classic argument, you know, they can't even keep drugs out of max security prisons, right?
Yeah, you know, and so how much will you ratchet up this war? How many people will have to be died and enslaved and have their neighborhoods destroyed, like happened where I lived in New York? And why? What are you going to accomplish? You'll end up putting everybody in effect in a maximum security prison or dead, which is where everybody I was growing up with ended up, basically. And they'll still have drugs. In fact, there'll be more drugs. You'll just have a destroyed country and a police state, and people dying from poison drugs and gangs shooting each other, and a completely corrupted justice system, and lots and lots of people in prisons, and it just gets worse, and they don't solve the problem.
No,
and it's the same thing they're doing with immigration when, you know, they're trying to stop immigration, but you have to create a police state to try to catch everybody. It destroys the economy. And all of these things, it's like the government declares war on anything, you're going to get more of it. They declared war on poverty, and as a result, the reduction in poverty that was happening before the war on poverty stopped. And we actually have more poverty as a result of the war on poverty.
Oh, yeah.
We have more terrorism as a result of the war on terror. We have more drugs because of the war on drugs. And all of these wars only serve to empower government and disempower individuals. And the same is true with all the wars that the U.S. is either joining or financing in other countries. All that does is it's not creating freedom in those countries. It's creating, it's feeding a cycle of violence and bringing it home back here, and creating blowback and terrorism and all of these things as a result of the U.S. interfering in these other countries and their business. So sure, they have terrible problems, you know, but we're not solving them. We're only making them worse and creating new problems.
Right.
Well, imagine being a person in Syria, and your child just got killed by a bomb or a drone from the U.S. Your child, your 6-year-old child, just got killed. What are you gonna do about that? I mean, if I was that parent, I would blow up the fucking country.
Well, yeah, I mean, people, you got to ask them to put themselves in the place of people that's happened to, and think about if we had a Chinese occupying army here, how would you feel about it? How would you react? How would you, you know, how would you feel about that army or about the people back in China? It's like, you know, if you've ever been in a place where that's happened, it's not very nice for the people there. You have these foreign soldiers that kick in people's doors, that spit in people's faces, that rape people and throw them in black hole dungeon prisons that they don't know where people go, and they come out and they've been tortured and beaten, and they treat you like a piece of crap in the streets. And by the way, it happens now in a lot of neighborhoods. That's how the police treat people, and they have that same reaction to the police because that's how the police act, like an occupying army. But when it's an actual occupying army, it's even much worse because there is no law for that army. They don't really have to answer for killing people or abusing people. They can do it pretty much with impunity. And if that's where you're from and you have foreigners disrespecting you and your neighborhood and your people like that, of course you're going to react. I mean, that's how,
You'd have to be extremely mentally deficient not to understand that basic principle.
Oh, yeah.
That they will react.
And then a lot of people here, they don't know that that's how the police act in a lot of areas, and that's how they're perceived. Like even where I was growing up, I mean, we just walk down the street, just, kids, friends, not doing anything, just walking down the street. The cops come by, they're cursing at us, they're calling us all kinds of names, they're telling us to line up against the wall, patting us down,
Really?
It's being treated like we were doing something. All we're doing is just hanging out, just being kids, and that's what they do.
Horrifying.
Yeah, I mean, when they killed Michael Brown, they left his body for hours and hours, just bleeding in the street like an example to his whole neighborhood. And then they wonder why they got Ferguson riots. Well, it wasn't just something that came out of nowhere. It's something that came because so many kids around there had been killed by police, and the people, much smaller thing, people just get treated like criminals all the time. There was so much enforcement of minor codes to fine people and leave them in debt and put them in jail because they can't pay their debt. We're not supposed to have debtors' prisons in this country. That's what a lot of the jails are, is debtors' prisons. People are there because they can't afford bail, because they can't afford court fines and fees, and then they end up with a criminal record, and then they have to become criminals because they have a hard time getting a regular job. So it's kind of like a lot of times it's a school to prison pipeline. Like you get kind of pointed in that direction from an early age. They say, oh yeah, this one is that's where they're headed to. This is what's in store for their future. So people are treated like they're in prison, even in school. It's like a prison. It's how their teachers and administrators treat them, like they're prison guards.
It's almost like everything the government gets its hands on goes to shit. Pardon my
That's
French.
exactly what it is. It's whether it's agriculture or industry or broadcasting, anything. They take anything and they mess it up, just to different degrees, whether it's healthcare or education. Once they insert themselves, they mess it up, and then that justifies more government solutions because now it's a bigger problem. And then it's layer after layer of that.
I could listen to you preach on that all night. I agree is what I'm saying. Yeah, it's such an insidious cycle. They get involved and then they break it, so they need to get more involved. And also, like, what's the quote? There's nothing more permanent than a temporary government program.
Oh yeah, we're still paying taxes that were put in to help fund World War I and World War II, stuff like that.
Well, I mean, you get bureaucrats who need to justify their own paychecks, right? It's not
Yeah,
just that we're going to
that
get rid
was
of them.
half of how they got the war on marijuana was because out of work, alcohol prohibition agents needed something else to enforce.
Mhm. Yeah, it seems like a monumental task to overcome, but I guess that's what the LP is for, right?
Well, we have to eventually. I mean, it's like we either have to evolve or it's going to kill us because you can't have this level of technology and what's coming with this kind of stupidity that government represents and the mindset it creates with people. And because that ripple of government violence just ripples as private violence and private coercion throughout society. Uh,
Agreed. Yeah. Uh-huh.
Oh. All right. Well, seems like we're in a lot of agreements on these topics here. Um, but speaking of the LP needing to being needed, is there where would people who listen to this who might be interested in helping out go? Like, is there a website or if they want to get involved more, where would be good places to direct them towards?
well, one is on the national website on lp.org. There's a how to help section. I recently found that, and I think that's a really nice section because it's got so many different things you can do all on one page. So it's at the top. If you go lp.org, it says get involved, and um,
There's
then there's one that says simple ways to get involved. If you click on that, learn more, and then you scroll down. There's a whole bunch of different things that people can do. So it addresses like different levels of involvement, whether it's voting or signing up for email announcements, get info packet, become a dues paying member, donor, state LPs. Then some states have LP voter registration. It's got a link for that. Put a bumper sticker. You can like it on Facebook, follow on Twitter, order a T-shirt, order door hangers, put a sign in your yard, fill out a volunteer form, order the quiz to distribute, buy promotional brochures, donate to candidates, volunteer to help candidates, become a candidate, contact your state and local party to get involved. So, all of these things are linked from lp.org / how-to-help. Or, you can get to it from the Get Involved button. Then they got a link for the convention, got a link for request more information, volunteer link, donate link.
on the welcoming committee of the convention, by the way.
You sure?
Well, I paid for it, and I'm trying to organize events. So far, we have kart races, we have gun range, stuff, and then we have karaoke, of course. I mean,
Yeah, another good one, lpaction.org has got a lot of like manuals on ways to do stuff because people want to do all this stuff, but they don't know different ways to do it to be effective. So if you go to that one, lpaction.org, it's got
yeah,
like different manuals for everything from creating a county party to different things about running for office and so on and on. There's Open Source Liberty is a good group on Facebook, which is a lot of people helping each other with different aspects
yes.
of stuff. So it's all there for anybody who wants to get involved in different ways. They're all kind of interlinked, but a lot of people don't know about a lot of this stuff and that it
No,
exists.
Well, okay. So how about we blast it? Because I mean, I know about all of the stuff, but a lot of people who joined the LP in the beginning, they don't know.
You mean like the
Yeah.
official platform?
We try to get the information out there, about these resources being available, but I think they need to do a better job of letting people know that a lot of these things exist, because part of the problem with the party is that it's mainly been built on a passive recruitment model, where they wait for people to come to them and just assume that because a lot of information is online that people will know how to find it. And it's just not how most people work. They don't look at a site and click on every button and, what's here,
Mm-hmm.
But that's not how I operate. I just shove information into people's face.
I actually try to get all of it. That's my problem is I try to get a completely comprehensive view of everything, and it's not possible because there's too much information that exists. But I get a lot of it because uh, there's so much there, and I can look at a lot of it. Uh, but a lot of people don't really go out of their way very much. They get what's being pushed at them, and they don't really go out of their way to find something that's not being pushed at them. And so the LP kind of gets sidelined because these other groups are much more effective at pushing themselves. Like, it's kind of the difference between Christianity and Judaism. With Christianity, you have proselytizing and trying to bring everyone in. With Judaism, it's like, if you come to us, if you happen to come over and decide you want to join, then we will test you and see if you're worthy. And if you pass a long, long process of hazing, maybe we'll accept you.
Interesting.
So, libertarians act like the Jewish religion in this sense, and the Democrats and Republicans act like the Christians in this sense. It's like they just go out, they try to grab everybody, they do everything they can to bring them in. With libertarianism, well, you'll have to find us on your own, and if you decide you want to become one of us, well, there's a very long process, and maybe we'll accept you eventually. Maybe.
Well, it is much easier to become a libertarian, thank goodness, because we can use as many as we can get.
Yeah, we definitely need to start grabbing people that are actually good at grabbing other people. That's where it's at. We gotta bring them in, by the boatload. And
Other people.
What was that?
I said I'm good at grabbing other people.
Yeah, that's for sure. You had said earlier that it's a passive model that the LP is using. That's kind of a problem. Do you have any like specific ideas about what could be done to maybe make it more active in recruitment campaign?
really just go out and do it. I mean, we've got to. I mean, we're teaching this stuff now a little bit more. For many years, it really wasn't, but now we do have party consultants that are like teaching candidates. Yeah, you got to go knock on doors. Then you got to get people to do a house party. Go to one of those. Get other people there to host their own house party for you. Well, if you look at how the LP was growing way in the beginning, it was that model. They were trying to organize from the bottom up, from house parties up. Um, then, for whatever reason, I have no idea, but the model became top down. Like, oh yeah, we're going to have a person to be over X number of states, and then if somebody from that state contacts them, we'll put them in charge of the state. And then once they get a few people from that state, then we'll put people in charge of a few counties. That doesn't really work that well because you can't cover all that ground. It's too much.
Sure.
But in Costa Rica, they did the bottom-up model, and they organized through house parties on up. And they went from 0 to having 9 of 57 people in Congress. within just a few years. So it's certainly possible for libertarians to do that. It's just not how it's been done here that much or enough. I mean, like a lot of times when we get people through the passive model, they are a little bit afraid of going out and like setting up a table and doing outreach. And if they do set up a table, a lot of times they'll just sit there and wait for people to come to them. Well, I think we really got to get people go out to like events where people are networkers by nature, like network marketing or whatever, and grab those people and say, hey, apply that to the party. Do your network marketing thing, but on behalf of the party. We also need to figure out ways to give people financial incentives, because a lot of times people have the desire to do these things, but they don't have much time because they're too busy just trying to scrape by. And,
For sure.
So we've got to match up, like figure out people's skill sets, figuring out who's willing to donate to to get people that have the ability to do it, to go out there and do it on behalf of us. And then those folks we need to have everything create as many courses and videotapes of stuff and get people into those. Like the campaign that I'm trying to help now, the idea we have is to make it not just a campaign, but a campaign school at the same time, to where we're going to be teaching everybody the process of what they're doing while they're doing it and documenting it and creating this as guides for other future campaigns.
Oh,
And
that's
then,
such a good
we're
idea.
learning at the same time, so people will be learning, let's say, fundraising or press releases or whatever they're doing, candidate scheduling. At the same time, they're documenting what they're doing, and it's a school for them and for others, like learning and teaching it as we go. So those kind of incentives, I think, can then, if we can fundraise for them, then we can employ people to do these things as well. And even if we can't employ them, it can be of use to people. Like if they're going through school and they can put it on their resume, or they can learn a skill or whatever it is by helping us, then that helps us because they're helping us more because there's something in it for them. Another thing is, I think a lot of people don't really have the luxury of looking at things long term and hoping that one day we'll win and change things. That's not enough. We need to also be able to change things in the here and now. So it helps when the party's doing things like the park cleanups we were doing earlier this year, because the government wasn't cleaning up its own parks. Well, here comes the LP and is actually doing the job the government should be doing but isn't doing. And that was a great recruiting tool. It got a lot of attention because we were actually doing something in the real world right now, not just someday when we hopefully will win.
Not just keyboard warrior.
Another one's like, if we tell people about fully informed juries and the right of juries to judge the law as well as the fact, a lot of victimless crimes cases start getting thrown out, and those laws become impossible to enforce because too many potential jurors know about it. So there we can make an actual positive change for the community now. If our candidates talk about that, they can actually win a real battle without having to actually get enough votes to get elected.
Yeah, and like at the beginning of the podcast, talked about like the ripple effects of things, and what's a bigger ripple effect than getting some kid off of a weed charge? You know what I mean? That's a great idea.
If we start getting people those cases thrown out left and right, the government stops bringing those cases, we've effectively ended the drug war, even before we have enough people in any legislative body to actually do that with votes. And you know, another thing is like if enough people learn of different ways to teach and learn skills, they become less dependent on government institutions, on institutions which give loans and stuff like that, on big corporations and big government, which become the only place where they can get a job if they don't have a lot of skills. You know, so we can actually supplant a lot of those institutions by doing it, not just by winning an election, but we can also be working on elections in that same time. We can do more than one thing at the same time.
All right. Well, I'm liking everything I'm hearing you say personally. Right there, I can. There you can. There I can hear you.
My phone cut out there for a minute. What'd you say?
I said that I'm taking care of kitty cats.
I'm having a hard time hearing you. Are you a ways away from your microphone? Oh, the joys of modern technology.
Yes.
I'm taking care of the kitty cats.
There.
Yes, because they're on the bed and I'm trying to make the bed. I mean, this is.
Oh, the cats are making your bed. I think I made that out finally. Правильно понял?
Yes. So yes, I'm here. I have heard all of it. Everything you had to say, Paul. Wonderful. And
I agreed.
And also, I need to take care of my kitty cats.
So yeah, we're starting another revolution, right? You were in the middle of Georgian Revolution. Now we're going to start another one right here.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah, we're doing it. So in the Radical Caucus. So I'm now in the endorsement committee, right? Which I renamed into the judgmental committee.
Yes.
Yes. So you know, we're sending this form to these people, candidates all over the country, trying to figure out where they are and if we can help them and how we can help them. So I'm doing something, right?
Of course. Yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So there's that.
Yeah, cool.
I'm starting to get a little tired, honestly. I have to apologize if I slow down here.
Yeah, me too. But Basha, I want to let you know that you have been such an inspiration to me. Really.
I mean, you are to me as well. I feel the same way. With it's nice to not be alone in a lot of thoughts because
Right.
a lot of times it does feel a little bit lonely. You know, sometimes
Yes.
like where's everybody that should be agreeing with me? You know.
Right. And that and then the fact that a lot of people don't understand, like it's my second language is your first language. Right?
Well, yeah. And then the funny thing is like I go on the Russian group and after a while, somebody chimes in with, "Well, you can't type in English letters. It's making my eyes bleed." I'm like, "Well, come on. I mean, I was starting first grade when we left. Give me a break."
Oh, I
Uh,
always type in English letters, and including to my mom.
yeah. Uh, so, I just said, well, I don't have a Cyrillic keyboard, and they provide a link. Well, here you go, Cyrillic keyboard. I'm like, what am I going to do with this? I can write like a first grader, you know, but I can read it just fine.
Yeah, it takes me a minute to write a keyboard sentence in Cyrillic keyboard because every letter is located who knows where. It's completely different.
The QWERTY keyboard.
Yes.
Well, it's a whole different alphabet, so it's you got to figure out I mean, people get used to it too, like they get used to where the overlay is, and they get just as proficient at typing in it as like the regular letters on the keyboard. But the problem is, it's not just the typing for me. It's just the writing, because I mean, I can write the little letters and the crayon and stuff like the 7-year-old that I was when we left. But it's not the same as having a conversation writing. Uh, you know, so it's it would be quite difficult for me to try to. I tried it actually in high school and college. I took Russian, thinking, oh, I'm going to get really much better at it, but no. It was, I'm still conversational like I was before then, and still not grammatically correct, and still not able to really write any better. It was just turned into an easy A both times, despite me having completely good intentions.
Mm.
Yeah.
I mean, I think really the only way to learn a language is complete immersion, because taking Spanish or Hebrew in school was not very useful either. It was like, go stay in Mexico or Central America for a few weeks or months, then yeah, that's useful. But take it for years in a classroom in the U.S., pretty much useless.
Agreed again.
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
Well, I have to agree with Anna from that. I feel optimism inducing from this conversation. Everything you've had to say is just pitch perfect to me. I'm glad that there are others out there who have think like this, like get the right people with the right talents in the right positions. Thought that was great. Financial incentives. I've been railing about that. And then just some of these other ideas I'd never thought of, like informing people about juries and stuff. Like, it's a lot of really good ideas here that can actually, if we start executing some of it, could really, really propel some stuff. I think. I appreciate you taking time.
Oh yeah, for sure. So we should
It's
find some more good people to talk to, and some people to listen, and it'll be good.
um, Basha, I am such a big fan of yours.
Oh well, thank you, and I am of yours, because it's actually pretty awesome. I didn't even know this thing you told me about the revolution in Georgia starting right where you were there. I did not know this until now.
Yeah. So, um, before we you know end this session of our talk, because we're gonna have many more. I hope so. Um, what um what culinary do you want to share with us?
You sure?
Well, I know that you do. You don't cook much, but just
Oh yeah, cooking. Well, yeah, I do sometimes, but it's different. I spent 20 something years on the road, and mostly in places where there was nowhere to cook. So I kind of got used to just going to restaurants. But when I do, it's interesting for me because I don't have any kind of set method. So I just throw everything that is available together, or
Is that an
you know,
analogy for the Libertarian Party?
yeah, or I might just do something very simple. If there's some eggs or potatoes, I might just boil them. You know,
Do you make
something like that.
do you make salad Olivier?
Yeah, it's let's see. We
So
do
for those
like
who don't ask, everybody needs to know what salad Olivier is.
it's like an egg salad with onions, eggs, potatoes. You see, a lot of times we'll put like pickles in it.
Yes.
Sometimes meat.
Yes.
You know,
I like
uh,
to put crab meat in it, but I like fancy stuff.
yeah, it's a thing. I mean, it goes well with when you're on your second, third bottle of vodka, it becomes very essential.
Mm-mm.
It's sort of like after you get to your fourth bottle of vodka, even if you never spoke Russian before, you become quite fluent.
I'm going to put this theory to the test.
Okay, go ahead. So, okay, go ahead. You want to put this theory to a test?
Did the more if I drink enough vodka, I'll
No, Pasha, you forgot. You have to put peas in it too.
Yeah. So there's there's different ways to any of these dishes. A lot of times we create our own variants on it because the recipes adjust because we have different ingredients available. So with time we discover borscht. Normally we always made it with regular potatoes, but recently sweet potatoes became like part of borscht, and I don't think that's as common
That
traditionally.
sounds
But
unholy.
so you know, uh, it's interesting what you can come up with by just like combining. It's what cultures always do. It's why the idea of cultural appropriation is so stupid because cultures always appropriate. That's how they
right.
become cultures.
Yeah, I agree entirely again.
So and it's funny because a lot of the stuff that people say, oh, you're appropriating some culture, but if you think about it, what they're saying is that you shouldn't be able to cross-fertilize cultures. Well, that sounds like segregation to me.
Yeah, I agree. Sounds just silly to me. Ridiculous.
oh well, you're not authentically Native American. Well, how far do you want to take that? Do you want to take everything that ever came from Native Americans out of your culture? Do you realize how many different things that are even common in Europe came from the Americas and never existed in Europe before the Europeans went to the Americas? I mean, are you going to get rid of all those foods, all those ideas, everything that came from the Americas? You're going to get rid of that because you don't want to appropriate everybody's cultures? Well, uh, how many different things came from China or Africa or Asia? Well, pretty soon you'll be living in a cave and wearing a animal skin because everything else is not authentically European.
Yeah. Well, they don't exactly have a very defined line.
You will not know what the number 0 means.
Well, yeah, but then again, you wouldn't know what any numbers mean because it's actually like a parody, but this is how stupid politics is. If you watch Veep, they were talking about, algebra is Arabic, so don't be a terrorist. Stop with this math stuff. Yeah.
That's funny.
Yeah, I mean, I consider myself a globalist.
I like cosmopolitan better or individualist because
Okay.
both of those, globalist is one of those words that people invented to sound scary, but what does it actually mean? Does it mean we want a global government? Well, no, I
No.
don't like that.
Right.
But
That's
they try to conflate that concept with being multicultural or being against closed borders. But those are different things. And so
Yeah,
I was
absolutely.
arguing with somebody earlier today. They said, "Oh well, if you don't have borders, you don't have a country." Like, well, first of all, I wish. States and cities and counties have borders, and yet they still manage to shake people down for money and create all kinds of red tape and screw and harass with people all sort of ways. But yet they have open borders between each other. So it would be nice to say, oh yeah, there would be no more states if they didn't have borders, but they have borders. They're just open borders.
Yeah. If it was only that easy to get rid of the state, right?
Oh yeah, I wish.
Uh-huh.
Can we just do that? But then they say, oh yeah, you're a globalist, and like, what does that mean to you? Does that
Right.
mean that I want some elite in
Brussels.
Zurich or New York to rule the whole world? No.
No.
That's not what kind of globalist I am. Globalist, like, I like all the different cultures of all the world being able to freely trade and migrate and travel and learn from each other and adapt each other's ways. Yeah, then I'm globalist.
Yeah, I'm
Yep.
definitely a globalist. And I also, I mean, I wouldn't mind being the queen of the world.
Yeah, you wouldn't have to twist your arm too hard.
Yeah, but I'm just kidding. Obviously.
No, I agree with you though on the globalist, because like when I hear globalist, I automatically assume like the European Union and just like political structures that are trying to centralize power. So it is a very confusing term, cosmopolitanism.
Well, yeah. Also, a lot of concepts are like that, like the political use of the term capitalist. What does it actually mean?
Mm.
There's capitalists like just you're somebody who uses capital to earn a profit, but that's got nothing to do with ideology. But politically, what does it mean? Does it mean you support free markets, or does it mean you support big business using big government to gain advantage for itself? So I think the term, as it's being used in politics, is intentionally used to confuse those two things, which are very different from each other, and make people think they're the same thing. And that's intentional because if you can paint free markets and corporate cronyism as being the same thing, then the only alternative becomes direct big government ownership of everything. Or you can call it anarcho-communism, but it's really just that, but just more localized. Because how else does the community enforce its own norms? It's basically just a very small scale, very large government.
Sure.
Uh, so
I,
uh, you
I also
know,
sorry.
it's so. What is this idea that they have of capitalism? Well, the problem is that they've defined it that way on purpose, so that the idea of an actual free market becomes impossible. Because when people hear it, all they think of is a government corporatist system.
Agreed 100%. This is why I do use the words free markets instead of capitalism. Absolutely.
So, are we all talked out?
Oh, um, we might be.
Well,
Yeah.
I'm pretty tired.
Yeah, it's 2 something in the morning here, but you know, I can answer questions if anybody else has any more. But other than that, I'm a little bit tired too.
Paul, this has been so wonderful. I mean, you are always such a pleasure to talk to, and I just
Oh yeah.
so insightful. Always,
Agreed.
always.
I had a great time talking to you.
So
I must say same thing. So we'll have to do it again.
yes, we'll do
Yeah,
it again.
definitely.
Yes. Um, much love to you, and we will talk soon. And have a wonderful night.
Yes, you too. Good night.
Yeah.